Welcome all as we congregate to the greatest toy line in community, ever growing, ever changing. As we collect and adapt these figures to our own imaginations and embrace the fun, there's much to learn, especially if you're new to Mythics. Welcome everybody to episode 10 of New to Mythics. I am joined today by an amazing dude, Diego, the ship lord from Four Horsemen Studios, customer service master, the gatekeeper of basically everything within Four Horsemen's, the shipping and the customer service, all that. He is the man. But not just that, he is a great dude. I've got to know him over a year and a half, 2 years, and I'm just super stoked and honored and grateful that he has taken the time to share an hour with us. Welcome, Diego.
Good to be here.
Thank you so much, man. I can't tell you how happy I am that you've taking the time to be one of the first, or to be in this podcast, you're the first time you're officially a guest on these shows. You know, you cameoed, but this is your first actual, and who knows, maybe you might want to do your own podcast or something.
Well, if I had enough time in the day, maybe.
But I get that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, most of my time is monopolized getting toys out to you guys. So
we appreciate it. I appreciate it very much. We all appreciate it. All fans definitely respect and appreciate you very much. This show, for people that are new to the show, this is my 10th episode already. Basically, it's not just for people that are new to Mythics, but it helps. It's kind of informational for people that are new to Mythics. But hopefully there's some good meat there for people that have been around for a while. I think if everybody knows Diego. If not, they need to. But this show is kind of informational, so we're going to dig in later on shipping, the shipping aspects, and the customer service stuff. But first, let's talk about young Diego. In the streets, like I say, what action figure did you have in your pocket? So what were you first interested in as a kid?
Well, I'm like on what you would call, elder millennial. So like that kind of that time slot between Gen X and like Gen X could be like my older brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I got a lot of that, like later G.I. Joe stuff and later Transformers. But when I was coming up, Ninja Turtles were still like obviously a big thing. Mm-hmm. But there were a couple like toy lines that were really big for me when I was a kid. And one being Skeleton Warriors. I loved Skeleton Warriors. Maybe that's, an indication of why Necronominus is, the Congregation of Necronominus is one of my favorite factions. Mm-hmm. And the Kenner Predator line, is a really big toy line for me, just for years. But also Z-Bots. Z-Bots are little robot figures, and I've actually recently been going back and buying a whole bunch of them and lots of them. And they were a little figure line by Gloob of Micro Machines fame.
Oh, okay.
And early 90s, it was prevalent. And I have like a whole box of them.
Oh, my God.
That's just what I've been picking up at shows recently.
How many did they make? Do you know?
They made, off the top of my head, I don't know the exact amount, but there's a lot of them. And a lot of them are repaints. And then later on, they got into like crazier ones, like the biters and the combiners. And let me see, is this one of them? Let's see, like I think this guy is like one of the combiners, like where you took 3 bots and put them together. And then they had like play sets, vehicles, all that jazz. So
it seemed like it was kind of cool too because they're small. You can bring them with you.
Oh yeah.
So if you're going with your grandma or your mom or your dad to an appointment, you've got a couple of little guys in your pocket that you can pull out and play with and stuff like that. So that's pretty smart that they have the smaller robots.
Yeah, no, I definitely like loved them. They were small. They were easy to play around with. I used to keep them. That old Star Wars Darth Vader carrying case.
Yeah, I had one.
I used to put my Z-bots in there too because you could fit a bunch of them in the slots.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one of the reasons why I think I got really into Glyos figures because there's like kind of like a similar DNA in there.
Yeah,
where it's like
it kind of twangs on the nostalgia chords. Now, were those, you called them Z-bots? Is that what they're called?
Yeah, Z-bots.
Now, were they sold individually or were they sold like in multiples or?
So you would have to get them in packs of 3 usually. Every once in a while, you could still find a carded set out there. You don't see them all. Usually, you see them loose, but you can. They would come in packs of 3. So that's why the combiners usually were like 3 bots that combined into one. There were a couple vehicles. I have a couple of them in the back. Some of them were like for individual bots. Some of them were larger. There's like a big like spaceship one, and then there's like a giant Z-bot base thing. So
really,
yeah.
I missed that whole. I missed that whole thing. I don't think I've ever seen those before.
Yeah, it's a really niche. Like it's definitely like my age group is like familiar more so with Z-bots.
Yeah, I think it's smart though that they made them small and in packs of like a couple, so like it keeps the price down. And they're also small enough to take with you. So, it's nicer when you're a kid and you go to whatever department store or whatever, and you're like, hey, can I get this? It's not like a giant expensive $30. It's more like a smaller packaged $5.99 or $4.99. You have a better chance of success. Of parents saying, sure, yeah, whatever, go ahead and grab it, as opposed to getting that expensive deluxe He-Man figure or something. So that's pretty smart on their part.
Yeah,
that they went smaller.
And it kind of makes sense for them because it was Galoob, so they were making micro machines which were already like smaller than Hot Wheels for sure.
Micro machines were huge when I was a kid. That was really big for me because, like I said, you could have 5 or 6 in your pocket and not get in trouble for having something in school. You could bring them in and show them off and on recess and stuff.
Yeah, micro machines were, and I also collected actually micro machines when I was a little kid. I had a bunch of those, and Hot Wheels, obviously. All those like classic.
Yeah, of course. I just think it's so interesting, and it's kind of, I mean, it has to do with toys, but it's almost like psychological how these companies would tap into your collecting, like the psyche or the psychological part of I got to collect, and like I want to get this color and that color. I want to get, you know what I mean? So like, they didn't make all the same Z-bot. You know what I mean? So they made all kinds of different ones. So like it does something to your collector brain where it's like, okay, I got this one, and now, I want to see if I can get this one, or I saw this one at the store, or my friend has that one. I want to see if I can try and, it's manipulating by these companies, but it works.
I mean, it's the name of the game. I mean, even back then they would be reusing, the same tooling and doing repaints of certain things. Like I said, Z-Bots usually they had two or three. Let me see if I can find two examples in here. They would have two or three repaints of the same mold. But it was different enough that you're like, well, I still want both of them, like even though it's the same
Absolutely.
figure. And actually, I failed to mention another big toy line for young Diego, which is very relevant to my current job, is the old McFarlane Spawn line.
Yeah.
I was pretty young when that first wave came out, and I remember getting them. I got them for Three Kings Day. When did they come out? 94? 93, 94?
Yeah, in that
Um,
area.
And
Those
I
were really
remember.
nice figures. Very, very detailed.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
remember
they
going.
were so cool. Like even at the time, I was totally into it. Like that whole dark sort of aesthetic,
Right.
lots of skulls and stuff, and it was superheroes. So it was something
Yeah.
different than Batman or Superman.
Yeah, it kind of taps into a lot of the male, things of skulls and superheroes and flowing capes and
Yeah,
kind of dark sided. Like the Crow was kind of a dark
yeah,
hero kind of thing. So like I think they saw how popular that was. So it's like let's do more of that type of dark anti-hero thing. Um,
yeah.
which is it's still prevalent today.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
So
And
did you? A lot of times when I talk to people, they say, "Oh yeah, I stopped collecting for a while," or there was gaps in the time that they were collecting. But some people have collected, like Bill and Dorklayer said that he was. He said when he was talking to Legion's ladies that he's always collected. Was there times where you took breaks, or have you always kind of had like some kind of figure or toy or something that you're looking for or having displayed on your shelf or something?
there was a little bit of time where I wouldn't say that I wasn't collecting, but I was collecting less.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Probably like when I was in from high school to like end of college, I would still pick up figures every once in a while. But you're at that age where like, now you're paying for everything. Mom
Yes.
isn't getting you stuff from Kmart anymore or
Yeah, it's
Toys R
like
Us.
how much is that? How much is that
Yeah,
that meal combo? It's
yeah,
$12.
yeah.
Jeez.
So in high school it was like saving money to like go out to like diners with friends and
Yeah.
buy D&D books, and I would still get figures though. And then college, every once in a while I'd pick something up, but I'd want beer money in my pocket too, so that
You gotta have beer money, man.
yeah, you gotta have beer money when you're in college.
Priorities.
uh
Because I was gonna ask you, like, was there a time maybe when there wasn't any toys that really interested you? Like, was there always like an aesthetic that you so like you were mentioning like robots or skeletons or stuff like
mhm,
that. So there might have been times too when you were not really like for me, like there was huge gaps in mine because yeah, life, I was raising my stepson and I was getting married and all that stuff. So I didn't really have time or interest, I guess, in
mhm,
collecting. But then when he became old enough to appreciate toys, I would take him to Toys R Us and I kind of browse myself, and I'm like, wow, there's been quite a jump, and that was right
mhm,
around when McFarlane had made a huge splash on their figures. So me and
mhm.
my friend, we didn't really collect figures anymore, but we would go and check out these Spawn figures.
Yeah.
And I remember he picked up Redeemer, and I was just like,
Mm.
oh my god, these are amazing. Their articulation is a little, but man, they were beautiful figures. The detail, and I think he did some like army troopers or something, some like combat. I don't know if you remember those. He did like combat scenes or something, and they were static,
Mm.
but they were really detailed. Very cool
Yeah,
figure.
when he started going into like the more statue era of
Yes,
his
yes,
figures.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of like where I started falling off of McFarlane as much. Like they were getting super detailed, but they were losing the toy quality. They were becoming plastic statues. So as the articulation diminished on McFarlane, that's when I kind of started phasing out of it, and started moving towards other stuff, like collecting more Joes and stuff. Because like I think Valor versus Venom line started kicking up around then, and all that stuff, which is like a hated era for a lot of Joe collectors. But I was buying it up. But it
You
was
like what you like, and everyone has different tastes, and you know, some colors and some aesthetics might not appeal to some people, and then other people, you know, that's kind of one of the main things that I really love about Mythics, even though I'm jumping ahead to Mythics, but just for a second. But I love that there's so many variations, you know, like, and there's the skeletons, there's goblins, there's dwarves, there's knights, you know what I mean? And so there's something for everyone. And I think that is very savvy on the studio's part, that they keep everyone happy by, you know, giving a little bit, you know, here's a skeleton, here's a goblin, here's a, you know, and they try to keep everyone happy, you know, with these waves. And I think that's cool, you know, that there's a variation. So if I'm not interested in this figure, there's another, you know, there's this figure. So I think that's pretty smart that they you know, have that variation. It's not just here's what you got, you know. It's a lot of different choices. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, and it's taken the studio, you know, many years to get to this point where we have such a catalog of parts and figures that, you know, now there is something for everyone. You know, I remember back when the first Kickstarter went up, you know, sorry if I'm jumping the gun a bit, but
that's okay. We'll go backwards, but go ahead.
Yeah. No, I at that time I knew the guys, I knew the horsemen, and you know, because I was working at NECA at the time, and we had gotten to know each other, you know, through Comic-Con and all that stuff, you know, toy circles. And I had missed out on the Bird Kickstarter, and I had bought some after the fact, and then the Mythic Legions Kickstarter was starting, and I was like, oh man, like I got to get in on this. Like, you know, that Bird one was good. I'm going to go all in from the get-go. And I remember back then it was really just knights, dwarves, and skeletons. There wasn't really much of anything else. I'm trying to think back of that first wave. Was there... And then there was Azar and Zazar. They were in the first Kickstarter, so there were a couple demons. But yeah, it was for lack of a better term, kind of limited. You know, you only had so many things to choose from. There was only so many pieces that they could swap around and repaint to make it look different.
Right.
And now you look at Mythic now. Like Mythic now is like light years, like different.
Huge toolbox.
First wave. Yeah,
a huge toolbox of parts and you know, and different sculpts and things like that. It's amazing. But okay, let's pause there. We're gonna go back. We're gonna circle back to that.
No problem.
So I still want to go back to young Diego.
Okay.
So you were in college, and you were kind of lightly collecting. You were still, you know, looking, you know, maybe checking out toy stores or online or whatever.
Yeah, I would still go into a Toys R Us every once in a while. I worked in the mall, so I would, you know, check out GameStops and everything like pretty regularly. It was just, you know, figures. That was the time when figures were starting to climb up in price.
Yes.
So it started getting more
quality too. I think the companies started to realize that there was older, you know, collectors. It wasn't just a kid's game anymore.
Oh yeah.
And so they started to make more, you know, nicer, premium, more expensive figures for us older, you know.
Yeah. So I remember getting NECA toys when I worked in the mall. I worked at Hot Topic, and I remember we got some of those BioShock figures and all, you know, it was a bunch of and Gears of War figures, and I remember
Yes,
being like, "Oh man,
there's
these are
still
awesome!"
great
And
figures
yeah, but I remember at the time being like, "Oh man, but they want like $20 for a figure. That's
for
crazy!" Like,
one figure.
yeah, for one figure. I'm like, "Oh man, it's hard for me to justify that."
Yeah,
Like now, it's like, I wish
right,
figures were
right. It's
$20.
on clearance. Jeez, $20.
Yeah, right.
But their stuff was really like NECA was one of the companies that really caught, I think, a lot of us figure collectors' attention was that they were going after properties like horror, or turtles or whatever, going after these properties that really have lasting impressions on us as kids, you know. And
Oh
I
yeah.
think that was smart. And then also they had like the video games and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I guess like to jump a little more forward, like after college was when I started working at NECA. So then I was like, oh well, now I can get these figures, you know.
So how did that process start? Did you decide like, hey, I'm gonna apply at
Uh,
NECA, or did you make the decision that you wanted to be like in the toy making business, or what?
so I mean, obviously, I like, as you know, we established, I've always loved toys. Even when I was collecting lightly, I was still collecting in some shape or form. And I had mentioned I'd worked at the mall, and
Mm-hmm.
one of my old managers had actually gotten a job at NECA, and he had been there for a couple of years. And when I was and we were still really good friends, and we still are today. Uh,
Awesome.
when there was an opening at NECA for somebody to kind of start up their eBay store, and I was fresh out of college. I think I had just graduated like a couple months before, and he hit me up and he's like, "Hey, like, I don't know if you'd be interested in this, but you could get a job with me, blah blah blah." So I applied, I interviewed, and I got the job.
Sweet.
Yeah, it was between me and another guy that I think he had more experience, but he was like in a band and had like some weird like kind of imagery to the band that I remember one of my later coworkers, telling me after the fact, after I got hired. He was like, "Yeah, dude, I was like, this guy is not a good fit." Like, I think this guy has some political opinions that might be a little problematic for
Might be
this
trouble
company.
in the future.
Yeah.
I remember when the eBay store started, because I think at the time there was not really a way to buy NECA other than going into like a Toys R Us or
Yeah.
GameStop or Hot Toys. So I remember the eBay store had like a way to actually order from NECA, and I thought that was super cool.
Yeah, at that time, the only other outlet they were doing was Amazon, and it's kind of hard to realize you're ordering direct when you're ordering on Amazon, especially back then, because it just looks like you're ordering from Amazon. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times it would be coming straight from the NECA warehouse, if the seller was NECA. And yeah, then the eBay store started, and what that originally was for me to clear out all like the messed up and dinged and damaged figures. So like the figures were fine, but the packaging would be like,
Yeah, I remember that because it was kind of random. It would be
yeah,
like, hey, like, or somebody would say, "Oh, I got this from the eBay store," and I was like, "Whoa, how did you know that?" He's like, "I just kept checking, or it would just pop up," and I'm like,
yeah.
"Oh, I'll have to start checking."
There were a couple guys that would just scoop up everything. We would put up old quarter scale figures that like, oh man, if NECA back then, like, we had so much stuff. Yeah, it was a lot of the like the even older ones that were more static, because like
Yeah.
NECA kind of went the opposite direction of McFarlane, where NECA started. Well, that's also because most of the sculptors at NECA came from McFarlane.
Really,
They
I didn't know
all,
that.
yeah, huge, just like they all worked with the Horsemen. It was kind of like another exodus after the Horsemen left. But like a ton of the sculptors, a lot of the talent from NECA started out at McFarlane Toys, and it's kind of interesting how like NECA started with like really statuesque figures with the real toys, figures, and like the Hannibal Lecter figure was like just him in
Yes.
strapped up, and the Crow figures had like 5 points of
Yeah,
articulation.
and they're really well sculpted,
Yeah.
but they were more like just on the shelf. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't for any kind of action posing or anything like that.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but when you have, guys like us that need some articulation and some, some posing.
Yeah, you want some action in your figure,
You want some action in your figure, absolutely. So,
yeah.
so just a side question off of what you told me so far. Why didn't NECA have their own kind of? No, I know they do now, but why didn't they have like their own online store? Why did they go through eBay instead of just having their own shop?
So they did have NECA Club, which I think they still use that as their like, or the NECA store, they call it now. I think they had that, but only for Comic-Con exclusives.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't want to have like a full-on storefront because they were more retailer based. So it's kind of like the same reason why we don't have constant stock on our store, on storehorseman.com. We don't have Zaxius is just arriving, and we're not going to have. We did our pre-order for Zaxius, but we're not going to have extra stock up on the website, and it's because we're thinking of our retailers. We want our retailers to be the ones to get that secondary business. NECA had like the same mindset where they didn't want to be like super out there that they had like an online store. They wanted people to go to retailers first and foremost because that was the bulk of the business. But the eBay store was originally it was a way to get rid of stuff you couldn't sell, because the packaging was dinged up, or something that was super old that there was only like a handful of. It was before the toy shows, so that was like the main way to kind of like move the product that was kicking around the warehouse for too long.
Yeah, it was still fun though, because you never know what would pop up.
Yeah, you're telling me.
I would get rid of this stuff, Diego.
Yeah, I would be going through racks of just boxes of random stuff. Like it was crazy. Like you would just find stuff like old stuff that would go for crazy money, and I would just like figure out what to price it at, put it up, and send it out. Yeah, it was cool, and I think it's still going on now. I don't know.
I think, I'm not sure. I haven't really checked, but I think it might still be.
I think I still get notifications from eBay every once in a while, but
you're like, yeah.
Yeah.
So were you happy with that? Like, was it like, I know you were young. Did it kind of fuel your, like, you wanted to be like more into the business? Were you just thinking, okay, this is a stepping stone, or were you kind of wanting to embed yourself into NECA? Delve in deep, man. Let me know what was going on there. Like, did you work your way up? Because I know eventually you were going to like the Comic-Cons and stuff, right?
Yeah. So it was me and Sam that would do all the shows, and I was like Sam's right hand man. He was like the head guy for the shows, and I would be kind of his like second in command in terms of like getting everything running and all that stuff for a while, like especially San Diego. And it was weird at NECA where, at least when I was there, like we didn't really have proper job titles. We kind
I
of
was going to
wore,
ask you that.
yeah,
Yeah.
we kind of wore a lot of hats over there. So we kind of, I was doing e-commerce and I was doing the toy shows and I was doing a lot of customer service stuff. But then I was also when they started putting their figures into Toys R Us's themselves,
Mm-hmm.
I was packing the stuff that went to the to the Toys R Us's, at least from the New Jersey warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
So I, did a lot of things over the years at NECA, and yeah, it wasn't really like a way to move up. You just kind of ended up doing more.
Yeah.
Um, but I always did really like going over to the Sculpt building and seeing all, because at NECA it's two different buildings. There's like the business side building,
Mm-hmm.
which is like the sales guys, the e-commerce operations, graphic design, all that jazz. And then there was the Sculpt building, and the Sculpt building was right next door, and all the sculptors were there, and
Mm-hmm.
prototyping and sculpting and painting figures. That all happened there, and it was always fun to like go over, see what's like being developed, what's getting sculpted. I remember when those two quarter scale Batman and Robin were getting made. Yeah, I remember when those were made. That was while I was there. And yeah, it was cool, especially because they were doing everything traditional.
Yeah.
So not I think now seeing how 3D sculpting can, like, what it can do, like, I think it's like awesome. I think it's like the way of like the future
Yeah.
for sure. And it opens up a lot of doors. But like there's something to be said for like, all those guys who were doing it traditional, even when a lot of companies were going full digital.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, that's how our studio started too. Eric's a phenomenal sculptor, and
Mm-hmm.
he is a traditional sculptor at his core, and moved to digital. But it's, having that ability to do it by hand, I feel
That
like.
process is amazing. So is it?
Oh yeah.
It's clay pieces,
Yeah.
or
So
do
it's
they build the figure initially out of clay, and then do they like sculpt like where the articulation will be, or how does that work?
so it depended on the era. With by the time I left, they were like sculpting the articulation in, so that they could figure out where it would go in and
Where
how
the
it would be
elbow
done.
bends or
Yeah.
the
Um,
waist or whatever.
and then also, when it's like reusing, existing figures, it makes it easier.
Yeah.
But no, it was awesome seeing, what people were working on. One of my favorites to check out was Dave Silva, who has Beasts of the Mesozoic
Mm-hmm. Yes.
toy line. The
I was
dinosaurs.
just I was just looking at that. Dennis Derby had sent a link of that on his thing, and I was like, this is super cool.
Yeah,
Super
so
cool.
that's Dave Silva. He was a sculptor at NECA,
Okay.
and awesome guy, super talented. Like some of my favorite NECA figures he sculpted.
Mm-hmm.
He did a lot of predators. He's really great at like creatures,
Mm-hmm.
and he started the we used to call it Dave's Dinos. He started his dinosaur line while he was still at NECA, and like that took off, and he started his own thing full on, and now he's got sculptors working under him.
That's awesome.
Um,
So
so
you're attracted more to like the creative aspect, not so much I mean the business side too, I'm sure,
yeah,
but you also kind of gravitated maybe towards the creative side to see that, to experience that process and stuff.
and it's the more magical part of the business. Getting to see something developed, made, and from a concept to a final product. It's really cool. It's also where I know Chris from the studio, because Chris worked at NECA, and that's where we met.
Mm-hmm.
And he was doing production, which I always found interesting, and you know I still want to like learn more about it. But it's a cool business just because it's unique. You
Yeah.
know, you, it's and you gotta if you love toys, like it's hard not to want to keep doing it.
Hmm. So, do you think that because you wore so many different hats at NECA, um, do you feel like that maybe made you more well-rounded um, for future, endeavors and things like that?
I will say I did gain a lot of skills and knowledge while I was at NECA. I learned a lot, and uh, it, it was definitely fundamental to like me being where I'm at now. Um, and there is something to be said about having a lot of hats and being it did make me well rounded.
Hmm.
Um, I did have a lot of things I had to do, and I learned how to do a lot of things at once.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
definitely helped, especially now.
Yeah. I appreciate you being positive about, I don't know how it was there at NECA, but I appreciate you, going over it and being positive and, you know, even things that might have been tough or might have been difficult, you can still learn from, and
Oh
grow
yeah,
from. So, and
yeah,
like you said, you met Chris there.
yeah.
So how long were you at NECA and then what was your next step after NECA?
So I was at NECA for about 8 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was at NECA
You
for
did your
eight
time. You put your
years.
time in.
Yeah, I was there for a while, and I made a lot of amazing friends there. A lot of I gotta say, like the people who worked there, like really, they made it happen.
Mhm.
We could make something happen that like with less resources than you should have, and have it work without a hitch.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was great. But during the pandemic, 2020, you know, everything changed. Things, the world was different.
Yes.
It was a stressful time for all,
Yes.
and it
Absolutely.
was during that time that my time with NECA came to a close, and I started working at a different company,
Mhm.
which was a subscription box company called Culturefly, and uh, that was in New York City, and it was a great place. I loved working there. Um, Great people, my bosses were great. It was less toy centric than NECA, obviously, and I missed that a bit. I missed the
Mhm.
collectibles, but they did have their form of collectibles, and actually, since I've left, they've really gone into it because two guys there are like they're toy guys, like they're into it, and we while I was there was a whole initiative to like make a new sort of high end collectible for people to want to get, and from that program they had this Reptar that they made where they partnered with James Groman, who's a well-known artist and sculptor. He's worked with NECA on a lot of the Universal Turtles,
Mhm.
the Universal Monster Turtles. Groman did like sculpture designs for.
Okay.
Um, yeah, look him up. James is a awesome dude. Very talented. And he did a Reptar with Culturefly, which I kind of I'm gonna toot my own horn here. Like I
Do
was the
it,
one who
man.
was like,
Toot.
hey, I was like, because we were looking at a lot of like urban vinyl sort of stuff in New York, and I was like, hey, it would be a great idea to do like a big vinyl Reptar, and you can do different colorways and
Mhm.
all this stuff. Like it lends itself very well because if you look at like there's a lot of like Godzilla vinyls,
Yes.
vinyl is a very like staple to like Godzilla toys.
Yes.
So it makes
Absolutely.
sense to like take Reptar, who's like the Rugrats version of Godzilla, and do something vinyl with that. And
Yeah.
but then the rest of that team, Joe, Eddie, Eric, they they took it, and Matt, rest in peace. They did it and they followed through, and it came out after I left, but it's an awesome product. And now they're doing these really cool Ninja Turtle like samurai vinyls.
Really? I haven't seen those.
Yeah, they're really cool. Just look it up, culturefly.com.
Okay.
They're
I'll
really
check it out.
starting to do some like cool vinyl collectibles nowadays, and it's guys who love toys and love vinyl. Um, George knows the guy who collaborated with them for these Ninja Turtle samurais. It's a guy George knows. Big surprise. George knows a guy in the indie toy scene.
Right.
But yeah,
So
they're
what were
great.
you collecting at the time of when you were at Culturefly? Were you what
Well,
kind of?
I was still helping out NECA on the side doing toy shows because my buddy Sam. It's funny. By the time my buddy Sam left NECA, more former NECA employees were running the toy shows than actual NECA employees. So like I was collecting a little bit of I was still collecting NECA stuff, a lot of Black Series classifieds, which I'm still collecting because it was 2020, not that long ago, and of course Mythic Legions, and throughout all the years I was keeping up with Legions. I would
I was going to
still
ask you that.
I was
So
I was all in on pretty much every wave. I think I have every figure except for maybe Arathian's dozen. I don't have all of those, and they're like kind of like half Mythic Legions, half not.
right. So how did Mythics kind of come into your peripheral? Was it just being in the know, like in the toy circles? How did you first hear about the line and the Kickstarter and all that stuff? Like, how did it come into your perception?
Well, like I had said, like I had met the horse. Well, backtrack at NECA, the Horseman had done a lot of work with them.
Right.
So the Horseman had sculpted a lot of the Eastman and Laird turtles, I believe, that NECA did it way back when. They also sculpted the Masters of the Universe Staction figures, which were like statues, because NECA couldn't make action figures because Mattel had the license for that. But it was those 2000X designs that the Horseman did that they made into these figures. So, and also all the sculptor guys, most of them knew the Horseman because they all worked together at McFarlane. So I would do San Diego Comic-Con, and the Horsemen were doing it back then too. And my buddy Sam was like, "Oh, hey, Diego, like come meet the Horsemen. Like these were the guys, And like I said, McFarlane toys were like a big impact on my collecting, especially at a young age.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And he was like, these were all McFarlane guys. So we, I met them, got to know them. And then, through the years of doing San Diego, we'd all, meet up. We always used to see Jim, Eric, and Cornboy at the airport on the way home because we all took the same red-eye flight, and we would always see each other at Phil's Barbecue at the airport in San Diego. So it kind of became like a tradition that we'd run into each other there and catch up. But after Mythic started, I did the Kickstarter day one because a lot of the guys in the NECA studio, were into the bird figures and had gotten those, and that's where I had seen those for the first time and said, "Oh man, like I gotta keep an eye on this." And then they announced the Mythic one, so I got on that. Was all in day one, and then while I was at NECA, I would just keep an eye out, and I would buy stuff. I would pick stuff up at the studio when it came in because I'd be like, "Hey, CB, can I come by?" And he would give me a tour of like what's
That's
new,
awesome.
what's one of the memories I have that stands out is when Grisha was being done for the second Kickstarter. I had gone to the studio to pick up an order, and CB's like showing me around. and I see the Grisha head, and I'm like, "What's this?" And he's like, "Oh, it's one of the guys next Kickstarter." And he, I was like, "This guy's awesome." Oh, you got a Grisha right there. Yeah, dude. I saw that head and I was like, "This guy's awesome. I can't wait for this." And
Yeah,
all I saw was the
that
head.
head's incredible.
I say he, and like I don't know, like Grisha's unknown. Like no one
I
knows
say
the
she,
Grisha.
but
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
them.
It's nobody knows what Grisha. I don't even know what Grisha is.
I
You
love
know,
that mystery though.
what's under the helmet? Who knows?
It's kind of like Boba Fett, you know, back in the
Yeah,
day. It's like you didn't know, you know, was it an alien? Was it a person? What was it? You know, robot?
yeah.
I love
It's
that
like Boba
mystery.
Fett before Disney got its hands on Boba Fett.
Exactly. So were the horsemen, they were kind of always kind of cool guys and approachable,
Yeah,
and I love that. I love
yeah.
that they're so, you know, approachable. You know, I told the story a few times about how I was a new fan and only had one or two figures, and the closest thing was MuskyCon, which is about an hour from me. And I went there, and Nate Strong was there, and Cornboy was there, and I think Jim was there. Yeah, Jim was there too, but I think he was at lunch or somewhere. And so just talking for a few minutes to Cornboy and Nate, and then I met Curtis and Steve Bishotti and Eric Miller. You know, everyone was just so damn cool. But like, I didn't know what the Horsemen. I had heard. I've always heard of them, but I didn't know like what they look like. I didn't know their names.
Yeah.
So I said, "Hey Nate, can you kind of point them to me when they get here because they were at lunch?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll introduce you." And I was like, "Thank you so much." And I was kind of like nervous. You know,
Yeah.
I'm probably near their ages, but I was just like so nervous to meet them and you know, be near these guys that have such a huge footprint in figures, you
Oh
know.
yeah.
And they were just all cool, you know. I At the end of the show, I have a picture of me holding a, you know, the unknown one that's autographed. I think it's on my shelf behind me, but they were just so approachable and kind and generous with their time. And I think that really sets them apart from other companies. Not to talk bad about other companies because I don't know, you know, but like I kind of look, I compare like Mezco, who to me are like a mystery. Like I've never, I mean, I was there in 2012, 2013, whenever the Dark Knight, the one,
Oh.
yeah, like I was there when they were showing it off. Like it wasn't out yet and we could pre-order it, and they had them there and I was checking them out and I'm like, this figure is beautiful. But I never knew who they were.
Yeah.
And for the Horsemen, it's like I know their names. Like I've said hi, and I've you know, talked about dogs to, you know, Eric Treadaway. It's just like a cool, you know, like that type of just being people, just being accessible and taking the time. It really, I think it really makes us fans of, you know, the line, because, you know, the line is of course amazing, but you know, it's the people that run it, like, you know, like you and like the Horsemen and stuff. It just makes it special is the only thing I could think of. So that's, sorry, that was my moment to gush a little bit.
No. No,
But
no. And it's kind of like the core of our company that, you know, we really do genuinely appreciate the fans, and we really make a lot of decisions trying to keep, you know, the people who support our toy lines in mind, and from a sincere standpoint, you know, because without you guys, like, we don't have jobs, we can't make things, you know. And it's we want to make sure that people are happy with, you know, what we produce and what we make, and we're always working hard to make things better, more exciting, because we, you know, ultimately pretty much everybody in the studio loves toys. You know, there's like maybe a handful of, not even a handful, like a couple of people who don't outwardly collect too much, everyone else is collecting figures. So
Yeah,
we all
I
love
think that
toys.
shows that love of
Yeah.
toys. It shows, and then also the caring. I was just talking on another episode about how, and I don't know if it's Jeremy or if it's all the studio, but like when they have a pre-order, they give enough time so that, okay, if I didn't get paid this week, I get paid next week, or they give us
Yeah.
like a month or whatever for a big wave. It's like that kind of thoughtfulness. Um,
Yeah.
or like the figure obscura. It's like, okay, we're gonna release it, Saturday morning, and then if you're working, we'll do it Saturday night. And it's like,
and we have some for sale right now. I don't know when this drops, but it's there's currently some still up on
I
Store
noticed that.
Horseman.
Yeah, I noticed that. I'm a few episodes behind. I think right now episode 6 is gonna come out on Tuesday. So you're a couple weeks.
A couple weeks away. Well, sorry to give everybody a little glimpse into when it's recorded.
That's right.
But,
that's right. So what was I gonna ask you? So we could kind of jump ahead a little bit. So you had and you had told me this story at one of the cons about how you had come to work. Was it part-time?
Yes.
With the studio?
Yeah, let me grab it right here because I actually
spin the tail, my friend.
So this figure, Vorgus Vermilius, the first version.
Beautiful.
Specifically, this one is the reason why I probably have a job at Four Horsemen Studios.
Okay. Tell the tale, my man.
So I was working at Culture Fly, and I had just started there. I wasn't there very long, and the Horsemen did a Exodus sale where they were just selling a whole bunch of old stock that was in the studio.
Jeez, and, where was I?
What?
I said, where was I?
Yeah, that was a good time to get in because you could get a lot of old stuff during that sale. So like Vorgus was from the first Kickstarter. So I went on and I had like all the figures, but I was like, I could use like another Vorgus. Like he's a cool figure, like I'd like a dupe of him just so I have the ability to customize, one of them. So I picked him up and I was on Instagram and I see Chris post a picture on Instagram of like a whole bunch of boxes, and it said like, this is going to be my weekend, like sending out your orders. And I had already kind of known that like he was working at the Horseman at this point, in a more full-time capacity. So I knew he was talking about the Exodus orders. So I put a comment that said, hey, send mine out first, just busting his chops. And he's like, come over here and pick it up yourself. So I was like, okay. So I hit him up. I'm like, hey, like I'll swing by and pick it up. And he's like, yeah, come on by. So I went over, and at that point, the Horsemen had moved their offices from like the upstairs to the downstairs. So it was my first time seeing it in its current figuration. And I went to the studio, and Chris is like at his computer, and he goes, hey, do you know anything about this program ShipStation by any chance? And I was like, well, Chris, actually, that's literally my entire job right now. Like is doing, shipments on ShipStation and organizing them and all that. And he's like, really? He's like, do you think you can help me out a bit? So I was like, yeah, sure. I'll help you a little bit. So I helped him, and I printed out like basically the rest of the orders from the Exodus sale and batched it in a way that would be easy for him to do, and gave him pick lists and all this stuff. And we're there, and my poor fiance, she was with me. I'm looking at her now.
She's like, yeah,
we were there for hours, and she was so bored because
I forgot.
you forgot that incident. Yeah, so I felt real bad because she was sitting there just like, God, we were supposed to this was supposed to be a pit stop. Like,
right.
And it turned into like
just picking up a box real quick.
Yeah. But yeah, so I helped Chris out, and he was like, oh, thanks, Then another sale happened, and he hit me up. He's like, can you come by again and help me out real quick? So I came by, I helped him. I was like, yeah, you guys are losing money over here, and here. Like, you know, that's why probably international fans hate me, because I was like, you guys are undercharging on international shipping, right? And they're like, what? So
Wait, what?
so then by the time Alithia was up for pre-order, um, Chris it was 2021, early 2021, and I think they were still doing like little in stock sales, but I think All Stars 3 was going to show up. That's what it was, All Stars 3.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris was like, "Hey, do you want to just do this for us part time, like in an official capacity, not just coming by and helping?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. I'll do it part time." And I was happy at my current job, so I didn't want to like bounce. So
Yeah.
not a lot of time. I wanted to give them a fair shake. So, from basically the beginning of 2021. I was working for the studio, doing their shipments, organizing them, sending them the labels, and having it in certain batches, and also configuring the shipping for figures, for pre-orders after the fact. So I think All Stars 4 was the first one that I configured shipping for,
Mm-hmm.
and then
So,
the rest
I
is
think
history.
you've kind of like streamlined their shipping and
Yeah.
made it better for us, as fans to get our stuff. You made it more organized and streamlined and all that stuff, I think.
Yeah, and the whole operation has grown significantly. Like, we when it started, it was just Chris packing stuff randomly throughout the week, and then Joe would come in on weekends and after work and like do some stuff, and same with Cookie. Cookie would come in on his off time and
Yeah.
to make a couple extra bucks, and then it just turned into everyone being brought on full time. They decided to bring Joe on full time first because they wanted just somebody shipping out product. Now Joe has transitioned into more like on the creative end of the studio spectrum, but when he was first brought on, it was to do warehouse stuff. And
yeah, his story was interesting too.
Yeah,
he had talked about that on one of the shows I was watching. I don't remember what it was, but talking about how he would come by, after work and help out and stuff. Or I think it was like he went to pick up his order.
Yeah.
And they'd, hey, like one of the horsemen would say, hey, come look at this, that, I just painted this or something. And he would check it out. And then, he would just hang around the studio and I guess help and just be an all around good guy. And eventually I guess they, so I think the horsemen have a good eye for good people. Maybe it starts with them and then they kind of, surround themselves with people that care and people that are fans of toys, but also good folks too.
And that's actually, it's really interesting you bring that up, because they really are careful about who they bring in and how fast they bring more people in. Because I was working part-time for almost 2 years before I was brought in full-time. And part of the reason is, they didn't want to do a thing that a lot of toy stores and companies did during the pandemic, which is there was this like surge in collecting during the pandemic because people had, more disposable income.
Right.
They weren't going out as much. They were looking for stuff to, stay busy. So a lot of people got into collecting. And a lot of companies like quickly expanded, like, because business like expanded. So they brought in a bunch of people, blah, blah, blah. And then, when things started slowing down, a lot of companies like either went out of business or laid people off.
Right.
And
downsized.
Yeah. And downsized. And the horsemen were always, like careful to like not fall into that pit trap. Like times are good now, but you got to make sure, like, see how business is going and is it sustainable. So I see on the Cabal a lot of posts and a lot of people saying like, oh, you guys need to hire more people. You need to hire more people, like, to do the customer service, to do this and that. And it it would probably benefit us to have it, but we want to make sure we're in the spot because we're a small company. We're a really small company.
Right. That was a side note. That's like the first thing that I asked you. Like I saw you for the first time, I think at PowerCon, and you had this awesome cowboy hat on. And I think I have that picture at the end of this show. But I came up to you and I'm like, "Excuse me, Diego. I'm a fan of you guys." And you were looking at what were those figures? I think it was Accessory. Unless I said it wrong. Is it Accessory?
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And I said, just out of curiosity, like how big is you guys' studio? And you're like, it's small, like like 13 people or 14 people. And I was like, what, for real? Wow, I didn't realize. I had no perspective. And I think that's something that a lot of people, especially people that are new to Mythics, they don't understand the size difference between, because you guys pump out so much product every year. You have these beautiful figures and waves and stuff, but they don't realize what a core group this is, of people.
Yeah, like I was just counting in my head, like how many people do we have, and like we've brought on a couple more people for shipping because like we want to be able to like get stuff out as quick as possible. But like in terms of full-time employees, like on the books, full-time employees, there are 15 full-time employees, and that's including like the bosses. Like that's including
that's insane.
That's the sculptors and painters and Chris and George, and it's a small company, and
I mean,
we work
look
hard
at
to make everything work.
Look at Poxus and like how many figures, the soft goods, like the articulation, the head sculpts, them being made in China, and like I don't know how big that pre-order was, but it had to be pretty damn big. So like that a group of you guys can, from beginning to end make this, in what did it take, like 2 years or whatever?
Yeah.
Or longer. Maybe it took them longer to develop or whatever, but just like that feat in itself, it blows my mind that could be achieved,
And, and the Poxus wave had, a couple things that set it back production wise a few times. So it got delayed longer than we would have liked. But, in general, it's crazy. Like the amount of stuff and the quality of stuff that we get done with such a small team,
Yes. But I think that, and I have no insight obviously, but I feel like the studio is almost comfortable with the size that they are.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, of course every business wants to grow, but you don't want it to be too unwieldy. You don't want it to be too corporate so that, we don't get to see Corn Boy or Jim or Eric anymore. We don't get that one-on-one kind of, I think that they feed off of that, or they enjoy that kind of, maybe not after day 3, they're probably tired of, seeing everybody and, pictures and all that crap. But like, I think they're happy, and I would think that they are happy with how much the studio has grown, but how they still have that small, the little guy kind of, but they've achieved so much in what they've, set out to do. And I mean, they're for me, they're a premier toy line that's competing against all these other probably much larger toy lines. So like, pat on the back to you guys.
Thank you.
Amazing what you guys have done.
I mean, just to give some insight, when I was at NECA, there were probably 60 employees in the New Jersey office, and there were other employees elsewhere, and then there was a whole like shipping team in the warehouse in California, like, and NECA is like still smaller than Hasbro or Mattel or all
Mm-hmm.
that. So if
Right.
NECA was like 5 times the size of the Horseman, like shows you what we're working with.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So let's segue that into a little bit of understanding, and I think we've started that already in talking about kind of the scale of the studio, and what you guys have produced and come out with. And I just want people to have understanding, or at least some perspective
Mhm.
on the shipping team and you. So like, you're basically customer service, right? So
Yeah.
like, is it just you for customer service?
Yeah.
Okay, so whenever there's any issue nationally and internationally, so if so I just emailed you a couple weeks ago about a pauldron for my stepson. He had two left pauldrons. So whenever someone emails customer service, um, that goes to you, and then so you have to hopefully have the parts or
Yeah.
order the parts, or and then ship them out. So every email that comes, it comes directly to you, right?
Yeah. So I have the customer service email on my computer, and whenever somebody emails me with a request, it comes to me, and depending on what we have available, we'll be able to send out a part. If it's a situation where like you had a figure on a shelf and it fell and it broke, we unfortunately don't cover that because we get a very limited amount of replacement parts from the factory. They only provide so much um, before it gets like expensive, and also before we don't have a lot of space. We're a small company, and our replacement part section is starting to fill up quite a bit because we have tons of old ones, and some characters we have replacement parts for that are older. Some we don't. Some there's
Mhm.
nothing left because we also use a lot of parts for development. Um,
That's
but
an interesting aspect too. How it's like, hey Joe, build, see if you can build this, with the parts. That's pretty cool. Like I never thought about that. That he's
he'll
going
he'll
back and
usually he'll get like a sheet that has like a list of parts, and it'll be like, "Go get that, Joe." And it's always I'm always teasing Joe. I'm like, "Joe, you're the bane of my existence with replacement parts," because like
yeah,
sometimes
you're
I'll go to
robbing me.
he's robbing me.
You're robbing me, man.
So
I needed that.
we've actually done something different now to actually help with that. So just to make sure like I have parts for everybody and I can take care of everybody's customer service issues. In the rare case that there's like an issue that is more prevalent than normal, um, we might go we'll likely go to the factory and say, hey, like there was this significant issue. We need you to make more replacement parts for
Mhm.
this issue, because obviously that's an issue on the factory level.
Right. So
Um,
is that something that would get like uh like shipped on a boat, or would that be something that would go on a plane like sooner?
usually we would have them like FedEx it to us, so
Okay.
on a plane, because we want it as soon as possible. The thing is, usually when it comes to the point where we realize this, the factory has to then make all these parts. It's not like they have it just sitting there. So they have to get the tools together, inject them, paint them, assemble them, and then send them to us,
Mhm.
which isn't quick. So I have some customers who are waiting on a couple key replacement parts, and I'm waiting on the factory to send us replacements, and
So they have to make them, or do they keep them? Do they have to reproduce
they
those?
have to make them again. So
Yeah.
basically, they have to make them again, and if there was any kind of issue, like correct the issue, um, and then send them out to us, and then we're able to send them out to customers.
And you guys probably track too, like this arm, there was an issue with this arm. So,
Yeah,
it's a factory thing. And so we need to make sure we have enough of this
yeah,
arm for this specific character to, you know, just in case there is that call or whatever.
Yeah, and like there were some people who had issues with like Kanox Vol with like his knee for Cosmic Wave 2. And because of that, when we got Pox's parts, we asked, the factory sent us extra Kalazir and Tharnog legs because they're all brute scale legs.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that case, we had a little extra made ahead of time, so there wasn't an issue with that.
Yeah.
But
So
I know.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I don't know. I was gonna say I know that there have been some complaints about the turnaround for replacement parts and us shipping them out to customers. And it is valid. The one thing I will say, it is just me. So think of it this way: when you have an issue and it's, hey, I need like a Callian head. I'll just say a recent line, a Callian head. I'm like, okay, we'll send it out. But in the time that I'm doing customer service, I'm going through all the customer service, and then I'm logging the issues, so I have a list.
Mm-hmm.
But the next thing I have to work on might be printing labels to get orders out to you guys,
Right.
or I do a lot of stuff with the retailers as well, which people don't realize. I do a lot of managing, different things with the retailers, so I might have to do that. So I have my list of parts to pull, but then I take that list and I have to go to where we have the parts, dig through boxes, find the bag with that figure's parts,
Right.
go in there, find the one part, put it aside, and
Right.
just getting one figure's parts could take like 5 minutes, which doesn't sound like much, but if I have 10 requests for parts at
Right.
5 minutes each, that's like an hour of my day, which I
Yeah.
don't always have.
And that's one of the one things, like, I wanted you to be on this show to like kind of give a face to the shipping and customer service, but also some understanding for people that are new, so that they know, hey, this guy is human. He does the best as he can. He's not just sitting waiting, eating a sandwich, waiting for you to complain or send an email. He's got 100 other things that he's doing. This is a small company. Have please a little bit of patience and a little bit of understanding. And I think a lot of people in the cabal know you personally, or know that the company is not a Hasbro. Like I've made comments to people that don't understand the size of the company, or that it's one guy that's in charge of customer service and getting your parts out. So please have a little understanding and be patient, and realize that you guys do care. You're doing everything you can to take care of us, and give us those replacement stuff, because like I think you and I have talked about like getting replacements from Hasbro, where it's like they just send you whatever. It's like, hey, my Big Ben is missing the backpack. Well, guess what? You probably are not going to get a Big Ben backpack. You're going to get
You'll get a
something
snow
else.
job.
Yeah, you're going to get a snow job. So I wanted to say that I appreciate you and what you do, and I just want people to understand that
No,
it's
I appreciate it, and it does help to have people like kind of champion us, for the people who don't understand that we're not this big company, that it's just one guy reading your emails and trying to make sure everything, like a whole bunch of other things are happening. Because then in the same post, like somebody will complain about customer service, and then somebody will complain about shipping times, and it's like, well, I gotta devote my time.
Right.
There are days
There's
that I'm
just
like,
one Diego. There's one Diego.
There's only so much Diego to go around.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know you got. It's a Saturday, and I don't want to take too much more time from you. I appreciate your fiance, giving me a little bit of your time. Tell her I said thank you very much.
I will.
And I would love for you to come on again to
Yeah.
talk about shipping, and I would love to hear more about like the Gylos and other stuff that you are collecting and stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But yeah, so let's plan a part 2
Okay.
If you're willing, if you
Yeah.
ever have the time. But I think this is a good spot to end it. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate you being on the show. And you know, you and the studio are amazing dudes, and I'm always grateful to see you guys. For people that are new out there, please go to these cons and meet these great guys. They're super kind and you know, gracious dudes, and you know, it's a good experience to go to these cons and meet these guys. So thank you so much, Diego. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, dude. It was a pleasure being here. It was a pleasure being on one of these many Mythic shows for the first time that isn't affiliated with the company directly.
Right. Yeah.
And I'll be more than happy to come back on and talk to you and talk about toys, because you know what? Who doesn't like talking about toys?
That's right. We're gonna have a part 2. There it is. There is the hat. I was gonna ask you, but I was like, nah. You know, maybe he lost it. Maybe it's in a museum somewhere. I don't know.
This hat, you see, this hat is too powerful. That's why I wore it at PowerCon. So I can only wear it, you know, every once in a while, because it's just too powerful.
It is too powerful. I agree. All right, my man. Thank you so much, and you have a good Memorial weekend. And I appreciate you.
All right. Appreciate you too, buddy.
Thank you very much. Everybody. Have a good one. Remember, friends, to always have fun, be curious, share, and enjoy what this line has to offer. Come for the toys, but stay for the friends. Good night, and thank you very much.
Purple gang.